My name is James Campbell. I'm the senior minister here at First Congregational Church, and it is always a pleasure on behalf of the people of the congregation to say to folks who come into the building, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. As you likely know, because it's a church, the congregation gathers here weekly for worship and service to others. But what you may not know is that we, as a congregation, also think of this place not only as the geographical center of town, which it is, and the historical center of town, which it is, but we like to think of this place as a center in this town for the common good, and the common good of absolutely everybody who lives in this town. So welcome, everybody, to this evening devoted to the very, very common good of reducing our waste and increasing our effective and responsible care of this beautiful planet, which is our common home. Welcome.
Thank you, James. I'm Ann McNulty, and I am co-chair of the Environmental Justice Team and Cheshire Creation Care. Before I introduce Sunshine Fiore, I want to urge everyone to come to the Cheshire Sustainability Fair that is sponsored by the Coalition for a Sustainable Cheshire this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. right outside on the green. At that, there will be a Cheshire Creation Care table centered on recycling as sort of a continuation of this talk, or you may say this is a prelude to that. Bring your questions. We're going to be having a put it in the right bin game, as well as a raffle to win a deluxe kitchen counter composting container. So come and take a chance on that. The following Saturday, October 15th, from 10 to noon, also on the green, will be Toys and Trimmings, which is a free give or take sponsored by First Congregational's Environmental Justice Team and its Cheshire Creation Care partners at St. Peter's, Temple Beth David, and Cheshire United Methodist Church. As a way of keeping unused items out of the trash stream, we invite you to clean out your closets at home and bring Halloween, Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas decorations, gently used toys, and sports equipment that you're looking to rehome. Or if you don't have any of those things but you could use them, just come and see what's there and take what you see. You don't have to give anything to take something. The only two rules of that are you cannot exchange money and you must remove all unclaimed items that you bring in. Now, on behalf of our Environmental Justice Team and Cheshire Creation Care, I want to introduce Sunshine Fiore, a member of our EJT. She is a packaging engineer with over 20 years of experience in the consumer production industry. She received her Bachelor of Science degree in packaging engineering from Rutgers University and is currently a manager at Unilever. She will present her talk, and there will be plenty of time at the end for questions. Sunshine.
First of all, thanks Anne and thanks James for the introductions, and thanks everyone for coming out on this rainy night. It's encouraging to see so many people who care about this. So let me just start with a little bit about me and my background, right? So Anne said that I am a package engineer at Unilever, and so my experience and my background in this is really on a national scale, because as a package engineer, it's my responsibility to know what is recyclable and to design and develop packages that are recyclable, right? So, and it's not just, like my company has a guideline that we all have to follow, and it's not just my company, right? The other companies that make consumer products, they all, I'm sure, have the same thing, right? Because we're all trying to do the same thing here, is to make packaging that is recyclable. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. We can talk about that a little bit. But my experience in this space is more on a national scale, because that's what we design and develop packaging for, really for US, Canada, and then some projects are global. So I'm not as intimately familiar with what goes on specifically in Cheshire, or in Connecticut, I would say, at the recycling center. But I know enough, I think, to give some pretty good guidance on what is recyclable and what's not. And we'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. All right, so here are some sobering facts, right? And some of this you might be familiar with, but you know, I'm not going to read all of it, but plastic's a problem, right? This is a crisis that we're dealing with, and it's photos like this that really touch at our heartstrings and make us think, oh my gosh, we have to do something, right? Because there is too much plastic that's out there, and it doesn't degrade. It takes 500 to 1,000 years to degrade, and that's because it's so durable. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I think what's also really interesting is that this last bullet point about how globally only about 10% of the plastic that's produced actually gets recycled. And in this country specifically, we're not doing a whole lot better in that, like, the number ones and number twos, which are PET and high-density polyethylene, which are the most recyclable plastic packs, they are only getting recycled at like maybe 25 and maybe up to 40%, but it's really not that great. And that's in this country where there is a lot of infrastructure. There is a lot of recycling that happens on the coasts, and I'd say in like Chicagoland, and then there are some major cities where it happens, but there are large swaths of this country where recycling is not a thing that people do on a regular basis. There's not as much infrastructure, and so there's I mean, you can see it as it's kind of sad, but there's also a really good opportunity, right? There's a lot of room for improvement, I'd like to say. Okay, so let's talk about how did we get here. You know, petroleum-based plastic, and I use that phrase petroleum-based because there are bioplastics that are formed from biomaterials like corn, like potato starch, like sugarcane. But I'm talking about petroleum-based, which are really fossil fuel-derived plastics. Have always been very inexpensive to manufacture. They're very durable, and they're easy to form into different shapes and sizes. And the raw materials have been readily available. So if you think about decisions that have been made in the past, and if you think about it just on a commercial level, right, for just economics, like why wouldn't you use plastic, right? It's readily available, it's cheap to manufacture. So these are why these decisions have been made for so long, or I would say were made for so long, just basically based on economics. But now we know better, right? Now we see these photos and we see all of the plastic and we think, oh my gosh, we have to do something. And I would say it's probably gotten more publicity in the past few years, but this has been a thing that in my industry that we've been sort of trying to tackle, I would say, more for the past like 10 to 15 years. And there's just more of an emphasis on it, I would say, more recently. So, but let's talk about the word durable, right? Because the plastic it's a problem because it's so durable, but it's also a benefit because it's so durable, right? And that's why it was always used, but the fact that it doesn't degrade and it doesn't break down, there's actually an opportunity to reuse it. And that's why we recycle, is so that we can reuse it, because there's still life left in this pack, right? And if you think about this milk bottle right here, yeah, I used it, I emptied it, but there's still energy in here, and there's still materials that can be reused, so it should be recycled, right? And this is what the circular economy is all about, right? Trying to keep these materials out of the landfills, out of the oceans, and keep it in our economy so we continue using it until we can't anymore. Okay. So the other fact that I wanted to just mention is that there actually was a UN study that was published in 2018 that said that 90% of the land-based plastics found in the ocean, and so land-based means it came from rivers and it wasn't dumped off of a ship. So 90% of the land-based plastics found in the oceans came from only 10 rivers in Asia and Africa. So if you think about that, it just sort of puts it into context, right? Like where this is happening. It's happening where there's not infrastructure. It's happening where there's not the opportunity to recycle. So you know, we still need to do our part here. And just because that's the sort of sobering fact, it doesn't mean that we don't still do our part, but it just sort of helps put it in context. Okay, so what's the solution, right? I mean, we have all this crisis. What do we do about it? Recycling, we're going to talk a lot about today, and that absolutely has to be part of the solution, I think. I mean, my answer to the question of what's the solution would be all of the above, right? We need to do everything. I know I've heard people say, and I've read, we can't recycle our way out of this problem. And that's true, I agree with that. Recycling alone will not solve this. But I think it has to be part of the problem because there's not, I mean, we can change habits, and companies like my company and other companies who make consumer products can give offerings for packaging to be refilled, but there's plastics are so pervasive throughout our society and throughout all of the consumer goods that we own. I don't think it's really feasible to think we can completely eliminate all of it. So that's why my view is recycling needs to be part of the solution. But there's other things we can do as well, right? So we can reduce plastic. As a package engineer, we're constantly being challenged. How can you make this lighter? How can you reduce the plastic? As you know, probably from a water bottle, all right? A plastic water bottle that I saw here somewhere. These plastic water bottles used to be much heavier, if you remember, right? 10 to 15 years ago, and you didn't worry when you took off the cap if it was going to spill. But they've taken so much plastic out of this that now it is almost a plastic bag. I mean, it's so light, which is great, but it's still there, right? And we're still using this once and then throwing it out. And so that's why I think we really need to just think about our habits and think about how we consume goods and how we consume goods and what do we do with what's left with it, right? And so that's why, you know, focusing specifically on single-use plastics, like a water bottle, like a soda bottle, I think it's important to sort of, that's I think where the biggest opportunity is to make some headway in that space. So a few years ago, there was someone from my company who encouraged all of us to take the single-use plastic challenge. And so that means try to go an entire week without using any single-use plastics. And you really have to think about it, right? It's not the easiest thing to do, but it was very eye-opening for me. And I thought, oh, I can do this. I already know all the single-use plastics I use, but I didn't. And so just trying to go through an entire week of not using any single-use plastics, it made me think about the saran wrap that I put on my bowl when I'm reheating something in the microwave. It made me think about the Ziploc bags I use when I make a sandwich and pack my lunch in the morning. You know, so these things that you might not even think about, it brings to mind, okay, this is single-use plastic. Is there something else I could do? Is there a container that I have that I could reuse? So anyway, I just sort of put that out there as something to more as like food for thought. And then we think about reusing plastic packaging. There are, I think this would be a great way to again, keep some of the plastic in use because it is so durable. You use it once and actually it's still pretty good. It can be used again. But usually our systems aren't set up that way. You just go to the store and you buy a new one, right? So refill systems I think are really important. And while I think that there's, for the most part, you know, in the US, consumers are pretty good about refilling their liquid hand soap bottles, right? That's one of the areas where we're usually pretty good about, okay, I'm gonna buy the refill pack and I'll just keep refilling into that same bottle with the same pump and keep using it. But that's like the only real space where there's, I think, sufficient, or maybe not even sufficient, but significant volume behind like a refill system. And so my company, and again, not just my company, but I'm sure our competitors are doing the same thing, of trying to figure out ways to reuse those packaging. Like I know P&G came out with a cleaning system for the Dawn dish detergent, and I think they use it also on like glass cleaner and other cleaning supplies, where they have that big pump, right? And I should have brought a sample of that. But that big pump is really, it's a special pump, and it's actually very uniquely designed. But they sell now packs where you can just reuse the pump and buy a package with just like a transit cap, where you can just sort of remove the cap and put the pump on. That's a way of at least reusing the pump because it is so expensive, honestly, and because it is such a, there's value there, right? And I sort of brought this as an example, like this is a sample, Dove, which is the company that I work for. So I know this is like, James said this is product placement, but it's not exactly product placement. It's just samples that I have access to. But you know, we've been trying to crack the refillable solution for body wash, right? Dove sells a lot of body wash. How can we make this refillable? And honestly, I worked on this project. My colleagues who actually developed this package specifically, we've been working on this for like probably 8 to 10 years. But getting it right so that the technology exists, the product works, and it's going to be something that the consumer's going to want to keep took a while. But anyway, we finally got something, right? So anyway, there's I guess my point is we're starting to make progress in this space. but consumers also need to come to it, right? So like consumers who want to do a refillable package, they might say, well, there aren't any. What am I going to do? There aren't any on the market. So now, you know, so that's part of it. The consumers need to want to buy these packs. But also companies like where I work, they need to develop it and have them make an offering. And then, you know, that's, I think, the way that we make this change where people are starting to reuse more of their packaging. So we talked about recycling. We're going to go into that a little bit more. And I just want to talk a little bit about the alternates to plastic packaging. Glass, aluminum, paper-based packaging, bioplastics. All of these, because, you know, if you think, okay, the dreaded plastic, we don't want to use plastic. Let's use anything but plastic. But you have to think about what that other thing is and how much energy is used to make it, right? So the waste is part of the, it's the very, I'd say, emotional side, and it's very visible. You know, you can sort of look at this picture, and like it makes you sick to your stomach, right? Just to see a beach with all that garbage on it. But you really need to look at the entire life cycle, and that's what an LCA is. It stands for life cycle analysis. And life cycle analysis will look at, for a certain product, all of the energy and all the sort of the whole impact from cradle to grave. So from the raw materials all the way through to the time it's disposed of, what's the impact from greenhouse gas perspective, water consumption, fossil fuel depletion, and what they call freshwater eutrophication, which is like pollution of the water. So anyway, an LCA will look at all these materials, and so while we don't want to use plastics, sometimes plastic is actually the better option, right? Glass is beautiful, right? And in some cases, it's a good solution. But like, think about Hellmann's mayonnaise. Hellmann's mayonnaise used to be packaged in a glass jar, and there was a big initiative to move to plastic because it saved on greenhouse gases. If you think about a truckload that's leaving our factory and going to the distribution center, a truckload of mayonnaise packed in glass will max out on weight before it maxes out on volume. So now you're shipping, maybe you're using twice as many trucks on the road just to ship a glass package of Hellmann's mayonnaise, right? So there's reasons why we got away from glass and went to plastic. So going back to glass doesn't always make sense. And plus, if you think about the bathroom, like I work in personal care, so consumers never want to have glass in the bathroom, just for obvious reasons, for safety, right? If it breaks, you have bare feet, it's a disaster. So anyway, that's glass. Aluminum is another material that is often suggested as an alternative to plastic. And as you can see right here, this is like an aluminum bottle. An aluminum bottle, aluminum is fantastic because it's infinitely recyclable. So the thing is with plastic is that once you start recycling it, the more it gets recycled. The material itself, while it's still durable and it still lasts, it does break down. And so eventually, it's not, you can't recycle it infinitely, because eventually the quality will be so poor you won't be able to make what you need to make. But aluminum is not like that. Aluminum is infinitely recyclable, so it maintains its properties. The challenge with aluminum is the amount of energy that's needed to manufacture it the first time and to mine it out of the earth is quite significant. So you actually have to use aluminum, like an aluminum bottle versus a plastic bottle. You need to use an aluminum bottle 6 times. You need to refill it 6 times to have it equate to the same amount of energy you needed to make 1 plastic bottle. So anyway, I'm just sort of throwing this out here to think about, like, when not using plastic, fantastic, but what are you going to use instead, right? And a lot of paper-based packaging is actually pretty good, and we can talk a little bit about the recyclability of that in a bit. And then just real quickly on bioplastics. So bioplastics are typically like corn-based, sometimes potato starch, but usually corn or sugarcane. And so what you need to think about, though, is if you have a field of corn that's currently used to grow food, and you now decide, well, I'm going to repurpose that corn and use it to make plastic bottles, then you're reducing the supply of food, right? And so if you do it on a large scale, it could have an impact on food prices, and especially in food scarce areas, it's like the last thing you'd want to do, right? So you need to be careful with that. And sugarcane is actually, so I don't think it's actually sugarcane. It's a byproduct of sugarcane that can be used to make plastic bottles. it's actually a really good source for bioplastics because it is readily available. It's something that's not going to be, you're not taking away from the food stream. And it does work quite well. The challenge is we don't grow a lot of sugar cane in this country, right? So shipping it up from Brazil actually has a lot of sugar cane, and there is a bioplastics that they use more of it there because it's local, right? So shipping the bio-based sugar cane plastic from Brazil up to the U.S. doesn't really pan out from a sustainability and cost standpoint. So anyway, I just sort of put this out here as like food for thought that when we say we don't want to use plastic, I'm not disagreeing with that, but you got to think about what are the alternatives. Okay, so let's get into like why you all actually came here today. So let's talk about, first of all, what makes a package recyclable. So a package can be deemed recyclable if it meets these three criteria. So it needs to be technically recyclable, so the technology exists to recycle that material. And then the infrastructure needs to exist to collect, sort, and process that material. And then this is the big one that a lot of people I think don't think about, is there needs to be an end market for it, right? So the output from the recycling stream, there needs to be someone who wants to buy that and use it. That's not always, I guess, obvious to consumers, right? Like, I want to recycle this, and just because I want to recycle it doesn't mean that actually gets recycled if there's no end market for it. And the end market for a lot of these plastics, you can see, are, I can go back into the bottle. I put Dove there, so yes, that is my company. But Dove has, we worked on this initiative a couple years ago. All the bottles now, almost all the bottles sold in the US and Canada are 100% PCR, so they're all recycled plastic. And that was a big initiative we did to first of all, because it's the right thing to do, but also to try to drive the demand, right? So if you think about the supply-demand model for recycling, doesn't exactly follow the same, I'd say, financial model that is typical, because from a supply standpoint, the recyclers, they don't have any control over what you put in your bin, right? They can't control the quality, they can't control how much goes in there. But the end point is sort of what they have more control over. So anyway, it's the economics of recycling, I think, is something that we could spend a whole other hour talking about. Okay, so I'm sorry, let me check my notes here. For the infrastructure part and the collecting and sorting. So the materials, as you know, as we have here in Cheshire, the single stream recycling. Now, single stream recycling was put into place, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, maybe more than that, maybe it was like 15 years ago. Anyway, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I always thought the whole reason for doing that was because to recycle more. Because I know we found in our home, we started recycling a whole lot more when you didn't have to tie up the newspapers and your bin was bigger. And it's like, well, this is recyclable, I'll put all of it in. And I was like, this is great. But I actually attended a seminar in June on advanced fiber recycling, and the fibers being like for paper. And the person who was leading it, the instructor, gave a little history lesson and said actually the whole reason for single stream recycling was came from Waste Management, which is like the largest really waste management company in the country. And they did it not to improve recycling, but for safety. Because if you think about the way the trucks used to come, and there would be someone either hanging on the back or the side, and they would jump off and they'd pick up your bin and they would lift up the materials to put into the truck. So you're talking about issues of lifting something constantly all throughout the day. But it wasn't even that. A lot of them were actually getting run over and killed on the road because people weren't being careful enough, right? So Waste Management as a company said, enough, safety's first, we got to do something about this. And they developed this system now where the trucks come up and they have this, this arm that kind of reaches up and dumps everything. So because of that, although single stream recycling probably had less contaminants and was like a cleaner recycling system, he said they'll never go back to having the way we were, where everything was sort of sorted at the truck because from a safety perspective. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting fact. Okay, so just about sorting, the materials do get sorted mechanically, magnetically, so that's why they use like an eddy current. There's an optical sorting, and some of the optical sorting is also done with technology called NIR, which is near infrared, and we'll talk about that because that's important when we talk about black plastics. Okay, so why don't we keep going here? Okay, so let's talk about what's not recyclable. So multi-material components, right? And so a component, that's what we call like some type of package. The sprayer and the spray pumps, spray pumps, any kind of like pump is typically not recyclable because there's multiple materials in there, including a metal spring. And that metal spring will do a lot of damage to an extruder. Extruder is what it's a equipment that's used to turn like sort of solid plastic into how they melt it. It goes through an extrusion system. So anything that's multi-material is not recycled. And I put also, I'm not sure you can see what that is, but there's on the right side of that is an image of a multi-layer laminate. So there's if you think about like for flexible packaging, like a potato chip bag, there's multiple layers there, and that's not recyclable. So technically the technology exists to recycle it, but what you're left with, what's valuable at the end of it, is just a little bit of polyethylene that might be in there. It's not worth the effort put into it. So there's actually there's a plant in Indonesia that I know our company helped to sort of support the research of this. And there's others as well, especially in parts of Asia where sachets, which are like small little like single-use pouches, it's a very common packaging format. But they're multi-layer laminate, and so there was this plant that would wanted to see if it was really not only technically but commercially viable to recycle these and to collect them, sort them, and recycle them. And what they found is that at the end, the amount of material that you're left with that has value it didn't pay out. It wasn't worth the money put into to the whole system. So. I mean, and that could change, right? The technologies could improve, I mean, but this is sort of where we are today. Okay, so foamed plastics. Anything that's styrofoamed, not recyclable. So that's kind of an easy thing, right? And if you think about it, like McDonald's used to have those styrofoam clamshells, they got rid of those because they're not recyclable at all. Gift bags are wrapping paper. So for most wrapping paper, there's a lot of coatings that are used. And some of them are synthetic polymer, some of them are foils, and there's so many inks there as well that what's actually the valuable part to recycle, which is the paper fibers, there's so little left over it that again it's just not worth doing. So that's why they say recycling, or don't put gift bags and wrapping paper in the recycling bin. Same thing with contaminated paper. So I have this image up here of I guess a Big Mac or whatever it is. And this goes back to, again, the pizza boxes, because pizza boxes is always a hot topic. Well, is it recyclable or isn't it, right? So if you have something that's paper that has some sort of grease or oil stain on it, that will just really wreak havoc in the recycling system, because as it gets recycled, there's no way to wash that out. And what it does is it kind of like, they call it a sticky, which is actually, they said, the technical term for it. But the sticky will attract all the other contaminants that get recycled with paper. So it could be some adhesive if you have a label on there. It could be if you have like a box that has like plastic tape on it, right? So all that kind of gets collected in this sticky, and it's basically like a defect that's on the paper. And so while they can handle a certain amount, a large amount is just, it really decreases the value of what they're recycling. Right? And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to eliminate contaminants, they're trying to eliminate, they really want to increase as much value as they can in what their output is, right, with the recycled paper. And so that's why they ask for I guess paper-based packaging that has food stains on it or food materials on it. So just real quickly on pizza boxes, because I forgot to put a slide on pizza boxes. So I know the Cheshire site and I think the state site also says pizza boxes are recyclable, and I think this has changed. It's gone back and forth. No pizza boxes. We'll take your pizza boxes. So here's the thing, and it really comes down to how much is their stain? Is it stained with oil? And if the whole bottom is covered with like oil and sauce, I would just literally just take off the top. I literally do just pull off the top, because the top is usually clean. Recycle the top and throw the bottom in the trash. But if it has only like a few small stains, then you can either rip it out, or if it's really small, then you can recycle it. Because there is quite a bit of value in that material, the paper board, because it's usually for boxes and for pizza boxes, it's virgin material, so they're virgin fibers, and they're really strong, and so they can be used. That's the kind of thing that they want to have, because there is value there. Let's talk about small containers for a minute, because I know this came up in the context of communion cups, and can we use a recyclable communion cup? The problem is, when items are really small, they sort of fall through the cracks. They literally fall through the cracks in the sorting system, and they don't get recycled. And so, additionally, I actually was reading on the Connecticut site where they were saying, and there could be a safety hazard, because I think as the conveyor belts are coming to, as they're meeting, if one gets stuck in there and then the belt kicks it out, it could become a projectile in their factory. And so they say, really, please don't put it with small bottles. And I think the dimensions are, I think it's 2 by 3 by 3. So something small like that is they say, please don't put in the recycling bin. And then paper cups and ice cream containers. So ice cream containers are not recyclable. They are paper-based. But what's interesting is that now we have like paper-based cartons. Oh, I'm getting too close. Paper-based cartons are recyclable. And this was another one that was like back and forth. It wasn't, then it was, then it wasn't, then it was. And I keep saying it's changing. And part of the reason why it's changing is because there is an evolution, right? In that as the recyclers are developing their capability, they're improving. And so there are changes. And sometimes it is confusing to keep up with it. I mean, I know I get a quarterly update, and I'll talk about it a little bit from this other company, or this other organization, about what's now recyclable and what's not. And it's part of my responsibility to stay up to speed on what the latest is. So anyway, paper cups also they don't launch, so paper cups are not recyclable. Although I have to say, I know Starbucks and probably some other companies are trying to get their paper cups to be recycled. And so, they're doing this testing. So there are now new criteria to say, yes, it's recyclable, or no, it's not. And they're doing a lot of testing on this. So I think soon they're going to be coming out with, hey, our coffee cup is now recyclable. So, you know, then we just have to sort of catch up with the state site and then with the town. Okay, so how do you know if it's recyclable or not? Like if you're not coming here tonight, or if it's not like a sample that we're talking about, how do you know? So there is this organization called Green Blue, and they are a nonprofit, and they basically took it upon themselves, and they are associated with the APR, which is Association of Plastic Recyclers. And they took it upon themselves to create a system. So we have one common system, and it's used from both the US and Canada, to inform consumers what is recyclable and what's not. And it's actually, I think it's a great system in that it's very consistent. And they basically have a website. So companies like my company, Unilever, so it's all voluntary, so it's not mandated, but it's voluntary that we basically upload our specifications to here's what the package is, here's the material, here's the thickness, here's the bottle, here's the label. Like they want to know all sorts of details, and we have to upload that information, and then within a week or two, they come back with, okay, here's your icon that you can put on your package. So a lot of these companies you can start seeing now, and it's hard to see here, but they have these logos on there. And so it's not everyone is doing it. Like this is just Nature's Promise, I guess, a Stop and Shop brand, but like they don't have it. But a lot of the companies are starting to. I'm sorry. Yeah, but that's just a QR code. Yeah, that's not a QR code, but it's like a 2D matrix code. But so there is no icon on that package. But it's starting to come, right? And I think more companies are now starting to do this because it is very informative. The challenge is sometimes it's really small, and sometimes you're like, what is that? You know, you need to maybe take a magnifying glass to see it. But like that symbol on the top left there, it says coated paper box, check locally. So that's what we used to get, but actually now it's just recently changed. That can be changed to say widely, well, it won't say widely recycled, but it'll be like the one underneath it that just says paper, I'm going to say paper box, and then you can recycle it. But if it has one of those, that asterisk that says check locally, that's where you go to the recycle site for Connecticut, which I'll show you next. So if you think about, all right, so we got the paper box, the coated paper was checked locally, now it's recyclable, paper box is recyclable. So if it has a symbol like this, which is just the chasing arrows, then that means it's recyclable. This one here with the line through it for the plastic tube, not recyclable. And then sometimes they have right on top of it, chasing arrows, like instructions on how to recycle it. Like this one here for the plastic bottle says empty and replace cap. So they do want you to put the caps back on the bottles, because otherwise the caps are too small and they'll sort of fall through the slats, just like a small bottle will. So they want you to put the cap on the bottle, even if it is a different material, because most caps are polypropylene, most bottles are either HDPE or PET. So they do want you to replace that. And then once it gets sorted and they grind it up, then they actually have ways of sort of sorting out, like they do like this sink float method for some of the materials to differentiate the polyethylene from the polypropylene. But most pumps are not recyclable, so that's why this one over here says empty and discard pump, because they really don't want that in there. And then up at the top here, this one is a plastic wrap that's not recyclable, and that's because it's not polyethylene based, but this one underneath it says, recycle if clean and dry, store drop off. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as to what to do with that, but there is a way to recycle your, what we call the flexibles, or like basically like plastic bags.
Sunshine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Pepperidge Farm cookies has that system, and it has one symbol for the outside bag, and because that's multi-laminate layers, it says no. But the inside is either paper or plastic to hold the cookies. And
Yes, I think that's what you,
yeah.
right here, right? So what Karen, so what Karen is saying, and it's really small, you probably can't see it, but there are two logos next to each other, and one of them is for the multi-layer bag, and the other one is for the plastic tray that goes inside it. Yeah, so you might see them like that. And I'll have some other examples, and we can look at that as well. So the other way you can know, because if it doesn't have this logo on it, you're thinking, well, how do I know then? So there's this site that's, I guess, developed by the state called Recycle CT, and it's so easy to use. I love using this once I found out about it. And so there's basically, you go to, like, I call it the Recycle CT Wizard. When I recycle it, you just type into that little search bar there what you have, and it'll say what to do with it. Goes in the trash or goes into the bin. So they also have this like flyers, like what's in, what's out. That's what this is, right? So you can sort of go there and it says like what's in, what's out, which is another way of sort of looking it up. But if you want to just type something in, and it'll tell you it's recyclable.
It's also a phone app.
Right. There's also an app, and actually, so we have some printouts here, but there's also a QR code. If you want to come and look at the QR code, it'll take you right to the site. And I'm sorry, we have these here too in case you want to just hang it on your fridge just so you know, because this is also quite helpful. So I would say the one thing, one downside to using this exclusively is that it doesn't know, the site doesn't, it's sort of generic, so it doesn't know what the specification is specifically for the package that you have in your house that you're trying to recycle. And this is an example. So, so for like frozen food packs, if you type in frozen food box, Recycle CT will say, put it in the trash. And the reason they're saying that is because in the past, most of the frozen food boxes were, had like a layer of polyethylene on them. And so they're saying, well now, they don't want that to be recycled. But if it had a recycle logo, the icon there, then you can recycle it, because it says that logo right there, says the paper box can be. But like Karen was saying, sometimes there's more than one, because there's more than one component in the package. So the one next to it, for the plastic bowls inside, it actually says rinse and discard lid film. It's that part you want to get rid of. But the inside it says check locally. So when it says check locally, that's when you go to Recycle CT. That's your sort of local check. Okay? So let's talk about flexibles. So the icon that says store drop off, you might think, okay, does it depend on where I bought this? It does not. This is actually a photo I took outside the Stop and Shop. So the Stop and Shop right here in Cheshire, and most food stores have this. They have some place near the entrance where you can recycle plastic bags. And I know that this has been here for years, even before we used to use a lot more plastic bags, and since the ban, we're not using as many, but they are still collecting it. And so it's not just plastic bags, though, that come from the store. And so this is the way I recycle plastic bags. I actually have a bag, and this is just like a bread bag that I use. It can be recycled, and so I put other bags inside it. So the items that can go in here would be, like if you still get a newspaper, the bag the newspaper comes in, paper towels, the wrapper and the paper towels, and I actually brought this, the big wrap that wraps around the big 12 pack when you go to Costco, which is where we go to get our paper towels. All of that is recyclable, and so this one actually has the icon on it, but so sometimes you don't know, because like most breads don't have the icon on it, but bread's always packed in polyethylene bags. I mean, I know this because polyethylene is the cheapest bag to use, it's the cheapest material, so they're never going to put more cost in if they don't need to. The exception would be for like a Pepperidge Farm or Arnold's where there's like 2 bags, right? So the inner bag actually, or the inner wrap around the loaf of bread, when you buy like Pepperidge Farm is like, it's a BOPP, it's a biaxially oriented polypro, so that's not recyclable, but the outer bag is. So anyway, that's a nice way of doing flexibles. And
Do we know where they go?
so where do they go? So I don't know exactly where they go. I know one example of where they go because I worked on the specification to use the material. So the colorant that goes into all of our plastic bottles, it's made up of pigments and of what we call a carrier resin. And that carrier resin is usually a low density or linear low density. And so when we were working on the project for Dove to be 100% recyclable, or I'm sorry, 100% recycled plastic, in order to say it was 100%, we needed to also include that carrier resin to be recycled plastic. And so we made sure that our colorant supplier was using a carrier resin from this source. So that's one example that I know of, but I don't know where other, so usually what's like recycled plastics is not as clean, so it might be like dingy, it might be like kind of dark, like a grayish color, so it probably would be going into, I would guess, like black garbage bags. Because the color doesn't matter. Okay, so, and then I put it here, the X next to the Lay's chips, because that's a multi-layer laminate and that's not going to be recyclable.
So Sunshine, the
Yeah.
plastic bags have to go back to the grocery store to one of these
Right.
things. You cannot put it in your own.
Right, so they absolutely do not want any plastic bags, any flexible packaging in your curbside bin, your single stream curbside bin. And the reason for that is they have, so one of their sorting mechanisms is what they call an elevator, and it's kind of like an angled, it's not really an elevator, but they call it an elevator because it's like this angled machine where it has these axles, these cylinders that sort of spin, and on top and on those are these cylindrical discs that look like gears, and they're basically carrying the lightweight packaging like paper and paperboard up top, whereas the heavier stuff like plastic bottles and metals and stuff will fall through. It's a way of sorting, but if you think about as it's spinning, if you get a plastic bag, it'll just wind right around it. It's like if you try to suck up a plastic bag with your vacuum, it'll wind around that wheel and just be a hot mess, to be honest with you. So that's why they don't want any of the plastic, any flexibles in the curbside bin. So thank you for asking that. Okay, so let's talk about black plastic, because black plastic is another one where it's, and you may know this or may not know, black plastic really tends to be not detectable, right? And it's because of this optical sorting, the near infrared optical sorting cannot pick up the carbon black. Now most black plastic containers, or anything that's black plastic, usually uses carbon black as the pigment to make it black. And the reason they do that is because it's cheap and it works really well. You don't need to use a lot of it. But it's not detectable with this near infrared scanner. So my colleagues who actually work on Tresemme and Axe, so my company actually is known as like the black plastic company because we have a couple brands that use a lot of black plastic. Tresemme is one of them and Axe is the other brand. And so my colleagues developed a new colorant that uses different pigments so that they are NIR detectable. So this bottle here from Tresemme actually has a recycling symbol now that says empty before recycling, and in the plastic bottle and you can put it in. So this is the NIR detectable black. They developed it like last year, and I was actually somewhat surprised and disappointed that when I went to the store to buy a sample, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all the old ones that still say like check locally. And when I asked my colleagues about that, it just takes a while, right? Once we make a specification change, for it to see on shelf, it could take a year. Unfortunately, that's just the way that the supply chain system works. So I would say for black plastic, I would say first of all, look for the How to Recycle logo, for that little icon. If it's not there, then it's probably not recyclable, so then put it in the trash. Okay, I just have a few other examples here. So raisins can come in different packaging. The package, excuse me, the cylindrical package is paper-based with like a very thin layer of plastic that actually is recyclable. It's very similar to the milk carton. But like Costco and Amazon sells raisins in these like a 2-pack, whereas the box that it comes in is just a corrugate box. That's recyclable, but the 2 pouches are not because they're multi-layer laminate. Excuse me a minute. Okay. So I brought this Clorox Tilex bottle because for 2 reasons. First of all, it's a good example of a shrink sleeve and a good example of a pump, right? So the label that's on this bottle right now is what we call a shrink sleeve, and the marketing folks love it because it's big. They can put all sorts of claims and copy and decorate this any way they want to. Because if they didn't have it on here, the label would be quite small. But the shrink sleeve makes the bottle not recyclable. So you need to remove the shrink sleeve in order to recycle the bottle. And that logo actually does say, for the plastic label, please remove the label. And so it's, and like Chobani yogurt is the same thing. It uses the shrink sleeve. Now Chobani doesn't use the How to Recycle logos, but it does have a little tiny saying that says, and they actually have a perforation, so tear here to remove before recycling. So shrink sleeves make that not recyclable, so remove your shrink sleeves whenever you see them. But the interesting thing here is that this pump is recyclable, or the spray pump, because it says empty and replace sprayer. So the sprayer actually is recyclable, which means they developed an all-plastic sprayer, which is fantastic. I mean, and this is what my company's been trying to do as well. This is an example of, that's a lot of conditioner, that has this pump actually is recyclable, and it is an all-plastic pump. The challenge with pumps are it's a mechanism, right, with a lot of moving parts, and so it's complicated and it doesn't always work. So to be honest with you, it's an example, but if you try to use it, it takes a long time for the pump to come back up to get more than 1 stroke at a time. So it's a work in progress, I would say. Okay, so cereal boxes, boxes for sure are absolutely recyclable. I have just some smaller examples here, like the Jell-O, it's all paper-based, right? So this is definitely recyclable. For a cereal box, you would want to, the bag inside should also be recyclable, but just look for the icon. So like I know with General Mills, they use polyethylene bags on the inside, so they're all, can be recycled, but again, not in your curbside bin, but take it back to the store. Okay, and this goes the same for whether it's a box of cereal, box of crackers, box of pasta or whatever. The pasta that comes with those little cellophane windows, that's actually still recyclable, but I know it's a contaminant, so I usually try to remove it before I put it in there. Same thing with a tissue box. The plastic that's that helps the tissues to come out nicely, it's still recyclable. They can handle a certain amount of contaminants, but too many contaminants will reduce the value of what their output is. And so I always try to just remove it because it doesn't take much to rip it out, and that way it improves the value really of what we're recycling. So I just have one last slide here, and then we can open up to questions. So I just want to talk a little bit about PCR. So PCR is post-consumer recycled material, and this just sort of shows what it looks like when you're recycling like a bottle, right? So the bottle gets recycled. This image here, you probably can't see it so well, but these are really bales. So this is what the material that gets recycled, it goes to a MRF, a municipal recycling facility. And that's where it gets put into these bales, and that's where it sorts plastics. And it'll sort the plastic by usually by by material. So a PET bottle will be separated from an HDPE bottle, and then they separate the metals and the paperboard, and that's where that happens. And then it becomes these bales, and then those go to a different center, a different place, where it actually gets recycled as what's called PCR, post-consumer recycled resin. And then that's the resin. You can sort of see it's kind of grayish there in that image. That's what's used back in the bottle. So that's what makes it circular, right? Is that we're taking a plastic bottle, we're using it, recycling it, and putting it back inside another plastic bottle. So that's the whole point of PCR. And you know, some companies will put something on their package about post-consumer recycled. That's what they're talking about. Okay. So that was my last slide. So I'm not sure. I just sort of wanted to open it up. I know that Anne and Karen brought some samples here. I can talk about actually. Before we do that, let me just go over a few things. So this one we talked about. This is interesting. Box. It's just basically like a single-use carton for water. Instead of bottled water, it's like just like a single-use carton. And this is recyclable, along with the milk cartons. This we talked about. Toothpaste tubes, not recyclable for the most part, because most of them are just like a multi-layer laminate. There are some that are all plastic. The challenge with tubes, and like even this tube here is all plastic, but there's just not enough of them to make it worthwhile to actually start collecting them. So although it might be recyclable, the MRF is going to look at it and be like, what am I going to do with this? And they're probably not going to use it. So that's the thing on tubes. PET bottle, so PET is the number, if you look at the numbers inside the material codes, that's number 1, so that's like a water bottle is PET. So PET needs to be clear though. So, where's that thing? This is, I don't know, mouthwash, but it's a white PET bottle. This is also a contaminant. They don't want this. Because it's not, there's no value in it, right? Because PET, the 99% of the market for PET is clear bottles, so they want all this to be clear. Now there are some exceptions. I think like Sprite, right? Is like that light green. The light green that's used for a lot of soda bottles. That's like an exception, just because there's enough volume there where they actually can have that and reuse it. Although I think I saw on ad recently that Sprite was getting rid of the color in their packs, and that's probably why, because it's it increases the value of the recycled resin if it's clear. And then what else did I want to talk about? Oh, so then I know Anne and Karen brought in some samples. So these, what strawberries come in, this is PET, that's recyclable. This we talked about. So this actually has this foil on the inside. Yeah, and it says, so it's a multi-layer bag that's not recyclable, but the plastic tray, check locally. So plastic trays are mostly polypropylene, and that, I think it should be recycled. Maybe it was polystyrene, I'm not sure what was inside it. Right, for paper towels and toilet paper, these cartons are recyclable. Yeah?
The paper shower bag, I just rip out the silver inside.
Well, that's the other thing you could do. I was thinking, you could just sort of rip it out and recycle the paper. Yeah, because it's the silver, it's the foil that's not recyclable. And that one actually comes apart pretty easily. A lot of the laminates don't come apart very easily. This one actually does. So yeah, that's a good point. So I don't know, before I go through all this, I guess people have specific questions? Go ahead.
That white PET bottle, does that still have a little number on the bottom of it?
So yes, it does.
So you would think it's still recyclable,
right.
even though they don't want it.
And so this, thank you for asking that question, because this is what I meant to say this. So that number on the bottom is really a material identification, and that's what it was always supposed to be. It's just a material identification, not necessarily is it recyclable or is it not. And so that's why it's, yeah, I know. I know. My mom asked me the same thing. She goes, well, why is it there? And actually, I think there's a new legislation in California that says get rid of the chasing arrows, right? Because it's confusing people. Yeah. Yeah. So here's the thing. Black plastic, although this is polypropylene, and this is recyclable as a material, but because it's black plastic, probably not. The thing is, they probably made it black because the polypropylene, the recycled plastic, because a lot of recycled polypropylene does go into making these. But then from there, if it's black, then...
But a lot of them aren't black, they can be
How about the
brown.
green one?
So, that's a good question. I would...
It's on the front.
right by your right hand at the bottom.
That's good directions. I would say this one probably is recyclable. I would maybe type that into Recycle CT and see what they say, but I would think this is recyclable.
Interesting, because I've had big plants that have been planted.
Yeah, so the other
And
thing
the guy always throws them in the recycle bin with all the
Right,
dirt and
right.
everything, and
So,
I'm thinking, no.
so the other thing is there is a limit on the size. Like if you have something that's really big, they don't want it. But
If it fits in the thing.
if it fits in the thing, it's probably okay.
Can I point out that a lot of the nurseries in town will take those pots back?
Back.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
good idea.
they
Reusing.
will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
reusing is always better than recycling.
Right, right. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot less energy.
And I think,
So there
That's
was
a
a,
good point.
and Home Depot and Lowe's say they will, and they're
Yeah.
not tried, yeah.
go ahead.
As far as plastic bags for the dry cleaning, you know, the Brooks Lindsay, all
Yes.
that, they all go back to, because I was going awkward when you're going in and putting it in the store, all of those can go.
That can all go in, yeah. And honestly, one thing that annoys me is that the opening for that hole is so small. Because I stand there and like I try to like shove it in, so that's why I now use one of these, like a bread bag to put it all in.
You can lift the lid right off.
I know, you can. Go ahead, Diane.
So I'm impressed in your company, it sounds like other companies too are putting a lot of time, effort, money into making more things recyclable. So what's driving that? Are they just good citizens or is it?
So there is so I think it's a couple things. There is a growing consumer demand for it, to be honest with you, and probably more so in Europe than in this country. And so a lot of these global companies, I mean, like it's, you know, especially in the UK and a lot of European countries, there's, consumers are adamant, get rid of the plastic. And so that's, I think, driving a lot of this. And so although that might not, that same anti-plastic sentiment might not has landed here yet, I think they're thinking it will eventually. So we got to give the consumers what they want. Plus it's the right thing to do. And from so what's challenging is it's so easy for them to make that decision if it's also cost beneficial, right? Like lightweighting a plastic bottle, we're paying less money for a plastic bottle. So that's like a no-brainer. Of course, they're going to do that every single time. It's more challenging when you're trying to put PCR in a bottle, because PCR right now is higher than virgin, and so they're taking an on-cost by doing it. So, yeah, it's a tricky one. Go ahead.
This is a question that I think about constantly. Shampoos and laundry detergents and dish soaps are made out of something like 90% water.
Oh, right, yeah.
Has there been any motivation to just put these things in concentrates and have people add their own water? That packaging would be so much smaller.
Right, that's actually what this is right here. This is a concentrated version of body wash, and then you fill it into this other bottle, and then you add water. So, yeah, I think there is definitely, and like I said, that we worked on this for so long because we're just trying to figure out how are we going to make this so that it's easy enough for consumers to do, where they get it, where they don't really mess it up, where it's like really easy and clear as far as how much water to add, and it has to actually work, right? I mean, like doing this for a body wash that doesn't really work, no one's going to buy it a second time, right? So cracking all of those, you know, and sort of checking all those boxes is challenging. It's sometimes tough to do. But that I know that I'm sure, like, you know, we're working on it. I'm sure all of our competitors are working on it too, because it is the right thing to do. And there are some consumers who will do that. There are some consumers who will never do that.
Right.
So, and that's also the challenge, is that, you know, we need to, as a company, if we say, oh, we're gonna, you know, like not use any pumps because pumps aren't recyclable. Well, you know what? The consumers are probably gonna then buy our competitors' products. So we offer the pump. Yeah. There was another. Go ahead.
The packaging that, plastic that's used for example, I bought nasal spray, and it comes with plastic around the nasal spray. It's not in a box, it's in plastic, and it's like really difficult to even cut it with a pair of scissors. What kind of plastic is, and there's nothing on it about recycling or anything.
Okay, so like a blister pack.
Yes, that, it's
So-
razor blades,
But
things
really
like
rigid. I know what you're talking
Yes,
about.
yes. So it depends. So those materials used to always be PVC, polyvinyl chloride, which like no one's using these days. Like it's number 3 on the scale of 1 to 7. I don't think anyone's recycling it because I don't think many companies are using it anymore. I know our company banned using it. Like we're not allowed to specify it at all because when it gets burned, it gives off like toxic fumes. So it could be, depending on, so it might be PVC, but a lot of them are changing over to PET. If it's PET, then it is recyclable. But you have to separate it from all that, like if it's just by itself, that's the one thing, but if it's like glued to like a paper carton board, like a backing, then they say they don't want any paper fibers on the plastic, which I know is, I know.
Yeah, I read somewhere that you're supposed to peel paper labels off of,
Yes.
like you said, the strawberry clamshell that you had for strawberries.
Right.
It has a plastic or a label on it.
Right, so specifically for PET, paper is a contaminant in the PET stream, and they really don't want paper. So this is actually, I think this is a plastic label, not a paper label. I think it's plastic, that's on here. So a plastic label is better than a paper label when it's on a PET bottle. If it is I think applesauce, like Mott's usually uses like a paper label around their bottle for applesauce. I try to take that off before I stick it in. And there's also more technology, like how to recycle folks. They are becoming more demanding of us as the brand owners to say, you gotta do better. So like with your labels, you gotta do better. Like if you have a bottle that, I think you have to have, if more than 80% of the bottle itself is covered up with a label, they're gonna say that it's a check locally. They're not gonna give you the widely recycled icon, because that label could impact the detection system. Because the optical scanners are looking for a bottle, they're not looking for all this graphics on the label. So they're being more strict, and they're constantly, like I said, quarterly they're sending out this email saying, all right, here are the new guidelines, make sure you're up to speed on it. Because they want us to improve as well, because that only helps everyone. Go ahead.
A couple of ones. Grocery store thermal paper receipts. Coated plastic boxes like English muffin containers, and just verifying Tetra Packs, like you're looking that water bottle, like the ones that include stock and tomato purees.
Yeah. So those. Let me start with what you just said. Then the Tetra Packs or the like what used to be used for like juice cartons and stuff. Those are now recyclable. And again, they were sort of back and forth on those, but I think there's enough paper fiber there where it is valuable for them to recycle it. The paper in general, as long as it's not coated in like a thick layer of plastic, then it is recyclable. So the receipts though from the grocery store, I don't know if there's any. I actually don't know if there how much plastic is on them. So I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
And then
the English muffin cardboard.
English muffin, yeah, that should be recyclable because that's rigid enough where there's enough paper fibers there where it should be recycled. Yeah. Go ahead, Henry.
You happen to know whether the Cheshire Senior Center still recycles empty prescription pill bottles? They used to.
That's a really good question. I don't know, but I heard someone say either at the senior center, or I heard someone say maybe at the police station. I don't know if that's right or not.
Those are, the pills. Take the pills.
Oh, just the pills, okay.
They don't want you throwing
Yeah, so I don't know, Henry. I don't know if the senior center still has a place to do that. Go ahead, Mike.
That was for a special project with a dog shelter.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a good place to recycle the empty pill bottles, because yeah, they're kind of too small to put into the recycling stream, but there's still value there. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you on that one. Sorry. Go ahead.
I have a question. I thought that styrofoam was going to be discontinued. And when McDonald's made that big switch, 20 years ago, I see a great, a lot still. Is there ever going to be
There's a bill.
that be discontinued? And I mean, it just seems to me like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Marge is here saying.
Yeah, there's a bill in the Connecticut legislature for Connecticut, and it's supposed to, it didn't pass 2022, but it's supposed to be coming up in 2023 to forbid it in Connecticut. So I don't know, but it's very different. I mean, California is so far ahead of us. I mean, there's no styrofoam in California, none. I don't even think there's this flimsy plastic in California anymore. The bags, the produce bags and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they have it. I did want to comment on this, on the app
Yes.
Because just as a note, I put in plastic plant pots and trays.
Oh, yeah.
And it is very comprehensive, and it comes around to everything we said. But it
Oh,
says
okay.
because it's black, it's no longer allowed. And then it says, only plastic planter pots, green, white, red, are acceptable. Ask your local garden center if they have a return program.
There you
So
go.
they really did the whole thing, which is pretty impressive.
Good,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a good site, like,
Yeah.
it's not foolproof, it's not like 100%, but it's mostly,
Yeah.
you gotta get the right answers there. Yeah, other questions, go ahead.
Yeah, I was at the Cheshire Pantry today as a volunteer, and I told them I was coming tonight.
Okay.
And they said, could you bring us a list? Because they have to separate all this
Ah.
stuff out. And, I couldn't even begin to explain what you said.
Yeah, so I would say, bring them this, and this is like, kind of like a little, quick
Okay.
snapshot of what's in, what's out, but if they go to that QR code, that'll take them to the site where they can
Yeah.
type in what's in, what's
Okay.
out. And actually, and there's something, you can also go to that site, and that's where this came
Yeah, they
from,
can-
right?
Oh,
So this
all
is like
right.
a
They can
nice
download
big
that.
list of what's in,
Okay,
what's out.
okay, I'll tell them so they can, but can I bring this?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll bring it to them.
We
Friday.
printed out copies, but we didn't want to, give out too much paper in case
No, I
people
know.
really wanted it.
I know, but, as I said, I could never tell them all that you said tonight. And we're very interested in it.
Good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I understand you can't put small things in the recycling. So the cartons you've got there for the water and the milk,
Yes.
those caps, do you take them off and put them in the trash, or do you leave the little caps on there when you put them in the recycling?
I think you put the cap back on, and I only say that because there was a brand of milk that we got, I think Horizon Milk has the How to Recycle logo on it, and
Okay.
I think it says put the cap back on.
Okay.
I think.
I think the
Are you supposed to crush them?
I usually do, just to make everything fit.
Yeah, that makes more sense. And then it's hard to put the cap on.
Yeah, it is hard to put the cap
By
on
the
and
way.
crush it, yeah. These caps usually this bottle is polyethylene and it's flexible enough that once you crush it, then I can
Yeah.
try to form it again just to get the cap on.
I originally got water in one of those small boxes, and it said on the packaging, this is a plant-based cap.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so they are using plant-based plastic for the cap.
That particular one.
Yeah, very good, okay. Go ahead, Ann.
Glass jars.
Okay, right.
Do you leave the metal lid on, and how clean does it have to be? I've heard several people say, well, I'm not gonna sit there scrubbing out the dried on, stuff.
Yeah, so that is a good question, how clean? I'm not sure I can give you a really good answer there. I do try to rinse them out as much as I can, and sometimes if that means like putting like a drop or two of dish detergent in and shake it up, that's what I usually try to do, is just try to rinse it out as much as possible, because I do want it to be quite clean. The metal lids is a good question. Actually, Bobby asked me that question just a couple weeks ago. I was putting the metal lids on until I went to the Recycle CT site and looked it up for Bobby, and I was like, oh, they don't want the metal lids on. But they say on the CT site to put the metal lids in separately, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because they're small then.
Because they're small, I would think that
Yeah.
they would fall through. But maybe because they're metal, they sort it
Magnetic.
out with a magnet. I think that's what it is. So I would put the metal lids in
And
separately.
for metal cans, the lid, just put it back in the can?
That's what I do, yeah. Put the metal lid back in the can, yeah.
Do you peel the labels off the cans?
I do. Actually, for metal cans, no, I don't.
Sticky stuff sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know if this has a How to Recycle logo on it. Oh, it does. It says rinse and insert lid metal can. So it doesn't say to remove the paper. Here's the thing. Paper's always gonna, whatever label is there is always gonna be a contaminant, so I would maybe take it off if you feel like it. If not, they'll still take it like this. All good questions. What else? I think we're ready to wrap it up. Go ahead.
I noticed, with the triangle, with the arrows in it, I think a lot of folks forget about the three aspects of it: reduce, reuse, recycle, and that. So I was just doing a little math. I've never bought a bottle of water and that, and I figured that's for about 30 years, and I drink about half a gallon of water a day. So it's over 45,000 water bottles that I have not had to recycle because I didn't buy them.
That's great.
And so it's pretty easy to have your own water bottle, have a BPA-free water bottle. That most of us are, I think are doing that. And as this lady said, California's way ahead, so far ahead of us. I lived in California for 18 years. And so just the, like the 7-Eleven, you could walk in, as long as you had your own coffee mug, whatever the coffee was, they'd give you a dime credit,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for that regularly. And they had a very advanced glass recycling program where you had to actually physically go to the place, but they had green, brown, and clear glass. And for aluminum cans, you know, like beer cans or soda cans and that, they just did it by the pound, so it was very easy to do it. You didn't have to stand in front of the machine and stick them in and do that. They just weigh it. And you got a barrel like that would be, might be 30 pounds, it would be $1.05 a pound.
Okay.
They would just weigh it. You know,
Yeah.
So it's just a lot more, it was a lot more streamlined. You had to do a little bit on your own in front, you know, front up, but it was, and I said that was 30 years, that was in the 90s. So they're, you know, they're way ahead of us now. Another thing too, just like things like single use, like buy a gallon of Simple Green. I usually mark on when I've written some, I just looked on that later, I said, wow, I bought this 8 years ago, I'm still using this gallon of Simple Green, 3 or 4 ounces, you put it in a spray bottle, and you go around and clean your surfaces. And so
Yeah,
you only use
that
one
works.
spray bottle and 1 gallon container, which I'm still using 8 years later.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are just seem common sense, you know, for us.
Right, and if you look for them, you can find them, but it's, you need to look for it if that's what you want to do. Yeah, well, that's great, thanks for sharing that. Go ahead in the back.
I had a round paper container out of metal bottle.
Oh, so if it's got a metal bottom, unless you can remove the metal, they don't want it. Oh, if you can remove the metal,
Just that the metal is trash.
yes, and then the paper, as long as it's, does it have the foil laminate on the inside, like for Pringles?
No.
Okay, so that's great, as long as you can remove the metal bottom, then the paper can be recycled.
Doesn't the plastic top?
I would put the plastic, is that gonna go in?
It's red.
Yeah. That's a good question. I'm not sure about that one. That's a really good question, now that I think about it, because like the raisin containers, I always recycle with the lid on, but is that the right thing to do? I'm not sure now. I have to check that site, the Recycle CT. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, it's a good question.
What about the Ziploc bags?
Ah, yes. So Ziploc bags, as long as they're clean and dry, they can go in with the plexiglass, the paper bags, yeah. But, you know, like I said, if you're like marinating chicken in it, you may not want to, but if it's something dry, absolutely, yeah.
Aluminum foil and an aluminum foil box that has the metal cutting edge.
Oh, for the foil box, so what I do there is I actually, if I can do it safely, I remove the metal edge and then I put it in. But aluminum foil, I'm curious what Recycle CT says for that one.
Foil is recyclable.
I think it is recyclable as long as it's
So
clean.
often
It's right, it's usually got food all over it, so then they don't want it. But if it's clean, I think that you can recycle it. I mean, everything I see here, everything I recycle, I usually give it like a rinse first, right? Like
Recycle.
you can
Make
recycle.
sure it's clean of food residue.
There you go.
Which it usually isn't, as we were saying.
Right. Go ahead.
I don't know how specific the Connecticut site is because I haven't used it yet, but I know different municipalities set their own rules. And Niantic only takes 1s and 2s. They will not take anything else. So
Okay, that's
when it
interesting.
says check locally, sometimes you need to check locally with your hauler, whoever is picking it up, because it can say it's recyclable, you know, clean and dry, whatever, but they're not gonna take it unless it's
So,
ordered.
yeah, if I was a Niantic, I would want to find out where is it actually going. Because to be honest with you, I mean, 1s and 2s maybe have the most value, and that's why they're saying that, but I think it all goes to the same sites. I think there's just a handful of places across the state where it goes to, and they might cross state lines. If you're near Rhode Island or Massachusetts, it might go to like whatever's closest, but I think all in New England, I think it's pretty standard, I think.
Well, I also thought it's the law. I thought Connecticut recycling is a law, that the municipalities have to recycle.
I think so. I think
So I don't know
would
how
agree with that, too.
Niantic can be deciding.
Well, but it sounds like they're only for
Is there-
plastics they're only taking ones and twos. They still,
They still take, aluminum, they
And they still take paper,
newspaper
yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that. But the plastic, they don't wanna know about the cottage cheese containers or the yogurt containers
Right.
or things like that.
but I would think it all goes to the same places, so they probably could take it, I don't know. And that's where, because we talked earlier about the list that's on the Cheshire town website about what's recyclable, it doesn't exactly match up, and it's mostly the same, but doesn't exactly match up to the state. So, but because it does evolve and it does change, I would think the state would make a change first, and then that has to trickle down to the towns, right? Because the states are they know more about what upgrades or what changes are being made at these recycling centers.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not plastic.
There was an article in the paper maybe 2 years ago about some of the waste stream, after they picked the recycling, they had to dump in the trash because it was too mixed. There's trash in the recycling. Do you have any statistics on Cheshire?
So I don't know specific statistics, but I heard the same thing and I was quite appalled. So a lot of the materials used to be shipped to China. And especially paperboard, I know a lot of they used to ship, and maybe not just paperboard, but I know they used to take a lot of the recyclables, and they would take, I think it was up to 20% contaminants in a bale. And then I think it was in 2018 they changed and said, look, now we're changing our specs, we're only going to take up to 0.5%. And everyone's like, oh my God, we can't do it now. But it almost, I think what it did is, because for so long we didn't have to improve the recycling, right? Because we could just, they took up to 20%, who cares, just put it all in. But then, and I think what that did is it made us lazy and we didn't invest enough in the recycling technology to make improvements because we didn't have to. Now we have to, and the changes are being made, and I think it's improving. So I know that doesn't completely answer your question, but I do think that most of our recyclables, I think, are being recycled. The problem is the contaminants. If you have a whole bale of say it should be paper, and there's all this plastic that's mixed in with it, it's going to decrease the value. And if that total bale has too many contaminants, then it might not get recycled, again, because of the contaminants. So that's why knowing what is recyclable and what's not is important, because it helps to increase the value of the output from these recycling centers. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you mention that PVC is no longer recyclable?
Well, a lot of the big companies are just not using PVC anymore because it's so dangerous. So there's not a lot of it in the market to be recycled.
But your house decided with that vinyl, and your fences are going up, it's decided with, and it's using that vinyl. The milk crates, remember, was it a dozen years ago? People were stealing milk crates, dairies couldn't keep them, and they were being shaped up and sold. So, I think there must be,
There must be some stream for it, yeah. I'm just thinking from the consumer products lens,
right.
It's not being used. Yeah, because again, I think it's more of the if it's burned. But there is I guess a market for it.
Is it just that if somebody gets their house decided, that's more recycling than they're going to do in their entire lifetime with the weight and amount of that product. So I'm just wondering if that is there any channel for that?
Yeah, that's a good point. There probably is. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Okay, good. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks for coming out.
Thank you.